My name is Dr. Allison Hopkins, and my field of research is medical anthropology. I look at the relationship between culture and illness and disease. Specifically, I do a lot of research that combines both anthropology and botany, and I did a lot of field work in the Yucatan in Mexico. In this particular region, there's a lot of Yucatec Maya, so they speak Yucatec Maya. About 85% of them also spoke Spanish. I was really interested in herbal medicine, so how families that have children and their children get sick treat illness. Oftentimes they would do things at home, like we do. You know, we often in the United States use over-the-counter medications when we're sick, and we don't tend to go to the doctor immediately. But they had remedies for earache, for fever, for cough. There were even a few remedies for diabetes. But one of the most common plants that they used, it's called epazote, and it's a weed, really. We would consider it a weed, but they use it a lot in food. So they'll put some sprigs of epazote in the pot with the beans, and it gives it some flavoring. But it also helps to get rid of parasites. There is a healthcare clinic in the communities, and people are open to going to the health clinic, but there's issues because they'll spend hours waiting to be seen by the doctor, then the doctor will prescribe them a medication that isn't locally available. So it's like I just wasted my time because I can't even get the medication. The local medical doctors could work with some of the local experts in herbal medicine. They could work together to find ways to provide available treatments to people for common conditions. My research is not focused on housing, but I did spend about a year living in this community, so I lived in these spaces and interacted with people in these spaces. And really was able to kind of see the positives and the negatives. So the Yucatan is a place that's generally very hot. So in the summer, during the day, on average 100 degrees Fahrenheit, very humid, and it's just very hot. They live in housing complexes with extended families, and so typically you have the husband's parents, the husband and wife, and then unmarried siblings, and also brothers that have already been married, and then their children. You have many buildings in this housing complex. Each nuclear family has their own kind of sleeping building, and then you have a cooking building, and there tends to be one for the entire group, so all of the women work together in that one kitchen. And there's typically a building for storage of corn. They grow a lot of corn and squash and beans. And then there was an area in this complex where people would go to the bathroom. It was kind of separate from the living areas. And around these buildings, you see a lot of fruit trees, a lot of growing of cucumbers and different vegetables. You also see lots of herbs being grown like cilantro, and many small animals. So they're very active places. You have lots of people. The houses they're round, they're kind of oval shaped, and they have thatched roofs. And the traditional housing structures have been designed in a way that really help with airflow, and they really help keep the structure pretty cool even in the hottest parts of the day. The walls are typically made out of smaller tree branches or really narrow trees lined up vertically. And typically the sleeping quarters are stuccoed, but the kitchen is not. They cook over open fires, so they need that ventilation. There are 4 large tree trunks that are used as frames of the houses, which is believed to connect the structure to the underworld, and is an important part of the Maya cosmology. But of course there are some downsides to these structures. There can be infestations of vermin, problems with rats and mice, snakes, and many of the floors were dirt. So you can potentially have issues with parasites, small children constantly touching the floors, putting their hands in their mouths, and having issues with high parasite loads. The Mexican government created a housing program where they paved the flooring of these traditional houses. So many of the houses, traditional houses today, have pavement on the floor. But they took it a step further and they started giving away construction materials. And the idea was to improve their lifestyle or improve health, or the kinds of materials that they provided and the designs that they suggested that people use were strictly based on standardized structures that have, pretty much the cheapest thing that they could make, so thinking about more about the economic aspect of it and not about the functionality for the environment. In fact, it's actually there are some major downsides to these structures. So one downside is they don't have this kind of rooting with the tree trunk like the traditional structure. So you kind of lose the symbolic meaning. And the cinder block houses are terribly hot, unbearably hot. They don't function very well for some of the other activities that these structures are historically used for. They're not comfortable to sleep in or to be in. You can't use them for storage or for drying corn, or it's just they're not very functional structures overall. So one of the reasons that people are attracted to them is because there is this stigma related to thatched roof structures. They relate them to poverty. Many of the local people, they're excited about the possibility of having a cinder block structure on their property because they think it's a sign of status. Mm-hmm. But once they get it, then it's like there's no functionality to it. So clearly the government wasn't thinking about what kind of structure might be useful from the local context and in this local environment that could really help improve the lives of the people that live there. So I went back to the Yucatan not too long ago, and I was traveling in another part of the state and with a couple of other researchers, and we were driving by an area and we noticed a unique housing structure that was using some modern housing materials, but followed the design of the traditional housing. And so I investigated a little further about that, and there's a new housing project that's working on incorporating traditional design that's very functional in this environment, but using more modern materials to help deal with issues related to vermin infestation and issues with parasites and some of the health issues related to the traditional housing structures. So things are starting to change, and there is a push to really get input from the local community and find out what can be done to help improve their living conditions while still embracing some of the amazing aspects of their traditional architecture and design and construction that they have been using for many, many, many years.